Good evening, everyone. My name is Isan Hines from MBKCares. Welcome to another edition of Wellness Wednesday. Tonight, we're excited about having a discussion about the voting process, just about our voice as people who have the power to vote. And this discussion is called Our Vote is Our Voice. We're joined tonight by a co-moderator and a director of the Fathering Circle, Eric Marsh. We're also joined by City Council member Jamie Gaudier. We also have Greg Benjamin from the 51st Ward. He's the ward leader in the community. We also have Emma Tramble from My Family Votes. At this time, I'm going to pass the microphone to Eric Marsh.
Good evening, everyone. Excuse us for being a little rusty. It's been a while since we did this. And as many of you know, we've had really a long and stressful days lately. So we want to first start off by going around and have our panelists introduce themselves. And then we're going to follow up with some words of encouragement and a moment of silence relating to Walter Wallace. But first, I want to start off with our illustrious guests. And first is Councilmember Jamie Gaudier. Councilmember, thank you for being here. Want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me for this important discussion. I'm Councilmember Jamie Gaudier. I represent Philly's 3rd District, which includes large parts of West and Southwest Philly.
Excellent, thank you. And our next guest is Emma Tramble. Emma, please tell us about your organization and what you do a little bit.
Hi. Well, the flyer had my company name on it, so I actually work nationally with nonprofits to combine tech and organizing to move folks on issues and prove it. So that's like that's what pays the mortgage. And then the other part is My Family Votes, which is my labor of love, and it's an all volunteer effort. And the focus is to provide Black voters with information to strengthen their individual and family's impact at the polls and beyond.
Excellent. And next but not last is Gregory Benjamin, ward leader of 51st Ward. Gregory, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Eric. As you stated, I am the ward leader of the 51st Ward, long time, well, all my life resident of Southwest Philadelphia. I am a retired clinician, having had the opportunity to work with folks who are who have disorders such as schizophrenia, bipolar, so forth. As a ward leader, I've had the opportunity to kind of revitalize a community or a ward that was really in a pretty difficult condition. So while the work is still great to be done ahead of me, I do enjoy the opportunity of being a servant of the people.
Excellent. And so I want to just say, before we get too deep in the conversation, that as I mentioned earlier, I know a lot of you are stressed in terms of your schedules and things that we've all been involved in the community, but particularly over the past couple of days in response to the police-involved shooting of Walter Wallace and his death. And so we wanted to acknowledge that because MBK Cares, our primary focus is on the health and well-being of African-American men in our community. And so because of what the tragic loss of life that just occurred recently, we want to take a moment to share our condolences to the Wallace family and take a few seconds of silence in honor of Walter Wallace and those who have lost their lives to senseless gun violence. All right. So again, we understand that this subject matter of police-involved shootings and the murder and the gun violence in our community is a major issue, and it's something that MBK Cares would normally be focused on. But we have an upcoming election which can impact a lot of those issues and many more. And so we wanted to take the time out before this upcoming election to educate our viewers on voting and civic engagement. So we're going to have a two-part conversation. One is about what's on the ballot, what's the importance of voting, but two, civic engagement and how to get more people involved. And we will be joined later on by Keith Warren, who is another guest that's going to be joining us, who's part of 100 Black Men and the Made Man Foundation. So Isan, take it away. If you want to ask the first question for us.
I'm actually just really still concerned about some of the things about mental health. So before we get into that, I know that there's a lot of people watching who may be concerned about whether or not the election matters. We have received several questions from people who are contributors to our show, and some of the questions were actually pertaining to the shooting this week and the death of the young man in Southwest Philadelphia, or West Philadelphia. We're not going to ask those specific questions tonight. We will acknowledge that mental health is important, and people are experiencing trauma while dealing with his death as well. So I want to just encourage people out there to take care of yourself in whatever way is healthiest, whether it be speaking to a therapist, whether it be taking time to journal, whether it be turning off the TV once in a while or going for a walk. Just make sure that you're checking in with yourself and that you're taking care of yourself, your mental health, and specifically knowing that the young man who died was having some mental health issues. I want to make sure that we are aware that mental health is a part of this whole conversation on many levels, even the trauma as witnesses. Eric, actually, I would like you to ask that first question, and then I will get in after that.
Okay. So as many of you know, I think everybody, including those under a rock, know that this is a presidential election coming up. For the panelists, please explain to us, the significance of this presidential election. Why are people so focused on the presidential vote, and what other issues are at stakes on the ballot? I know that there's a few things on the Philadelphia ballot as particularly. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts around why this particular election is significant and what other things voters should be focused on. And I'd like to go to Emma Tramble first.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's interesting because, I kind of just professionally and just in general eat, sleep, and breathe like politics. And one of the things that I have really had like this awakening around this election and probably the last few cycles, is that when you're voting for a candidate, if you're just voting for a candidate, it's actually not very powerful. But if you're voting for what that person can do with the system, that is because what we're looking at actually, and what's been playing out in the last 4 years up front and in your face, is big systemic changes. And so now, when I'm talking to voters, I'm like, look, yeah, you may not be that excited about the candidate, but let's think about what we can do with the system, right? So then it's like, okay, you care about healthcare? Well, you need judges in place that are going to sustain it, right? So it's all these other pieces underneath it. So it's not so much that we focus just on one office, but how it all works in the system. So I'm glad we have our council member here. I think both Greg and I both live in your district. That, every piece matters. And so we can't take anything for granted. There are ballot questions, around stop and frisk and about police oversight. So you got to look on both sides if you're voting by mail, both sides, and all the way down if you're on the machine. I'm going to let the other panelists, and we can jump in, as you said. So I know they have a lot of insight here too. So that's almost that.
Thank you for that, Emma. Council member, what are your thoughts on that question?
I don't think we could have a clearer example of why it's so important to vote and to participate than what has happened over these past 4 years. There couldn't be a worse president for this time, right? Over 200,000 Americans have died from coronavirus because of the president we have in office. We have a president who doesn't believe in the viability of cities and therefore doesn't want to invest in cities. And it almost seems like he's at war with cities, particularly cities that are majority Black and brown. We have a president who has created this culture of white supremacy. I've never in my life been as afraid as I am now to traverse the world as a Black person. And I think a lot of that relates directly to the rhetoric and the policies that have been instituted by this president. And so I hope people realize how important this is. Last time in 2016, Trump won PA by 44,000 votes. That is a tiny margin, a fraction of a percentage point in terms of all of the registered voters that we have here. And so your vote really does matter, and who the president is matters. And so I just hope that's been demonstrated for people. And I get the sense that it has. I do think that people are seeing this election a little bit differently.
So before we go to Greg, I want to kind of throw in another question for you, Greg, for you to kind of touch on. And, it's this idea that, yes, the president is important. Yes, that the president matters. But it also makes me think about Barack Obama's term in office, particularly his first term, right? After the changing of the guard, so to speak, in Congress and the Senate, right? And the pushback that he received from our state representatives, right? How significant is the president in relation to these other elections that happen? And what should people know about, the presidential election versus the other options that are on the ballot? And you're muted.
Eric, you bring up an excellent question. I think it's important for us to be really concerned about the presidential seat. I think it's imperative that we mobilize our communities and people across this country, that we get a change in who will be the next president. But I also think it's imperative that we understand the significance of, say, like a Dwight Evans, who will be running for congressman, and realizing that if we don't have Congress people in place and U.S. senators in place that can support those positions that the president has, then we still can end up with another situation similar to what was the situation with Barack Obama, which was, while he may have had good ideas, he didn't have a Senate that was supportive, a Congress that was supportive, and he was always being fought, and he couldn't get the votes. So yes, we really need to be concerned about who our next president is. I think we need to put out all the energy we can to pursue putting in the president that we feel is more to our liking, to the issues, not even so much to our liking, but the issues. But it's just as important that we make sure that the congressional seats and other seats that will be held in Washington are filled with the people who are like-minded. Because again, Barack Obama was a classic example or a classic case of what it can be like for a president who may have good ideas, but if he doesn't have the support on the congressional level in those areas in the Senate, the U.S. Senate, that he will not be able to achieve much.
Exactly. Lisa?
That was a great point. Actually, can you hear me?
Emma, you had your hand up?
Yeah, okay. I have a quickie. I don't know if a lot of your viewers or followers are outside of Philly, but the state rep and state Senate seats, those people are the Republicans are in the majority, and they're saying, they're putting a lot of obstruction in place as far as our voting. And in some of the areas, the seats are competitive. So if you live in a district where there is a competitive race on the state level, please make sure you vote for those offices, because literally our state legislature is trying to roll back like the deadlines for when like mail-in ballots are due. They're trying to move it through the courts, and it's like, well, wait a minute, we're all in the same state. So we have to be very mindful of those other, like the local offices too, that are on our ballots. I live in a district, there's nobody running against the person who won the seat in the primary. But in other areas, make sure you check your ballot to see if it's competitive.
to Emma's point, I also wanted to take it back to Walter Wallace Jr. You know, I know a lot of people had questions about that. It's the state legislation at the state level impacts whether we're able to hold officers really accountable for these kind of acts. And it's because we don't have a Democratic majority that we really haven't been able to move forward to put in place stronger rules around arbitration and stronger sort of accountability measures in place.
Interesting.
Jamie, you actually just touched on something I wanted to ask you. So can you explain how the presidential election will impact inner city issues such as gun violence, poverty, and the pandemic?
Sure. You know, this president, as I said, like I feel like he almost has positioned himself as against cities, particularly cities where Black people live, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of federal funding that flows through our city that we need, right? We have money for affordable housing in the midst of an affordable housing crisis, money for education programs. You know, if we had a president who was willing, we could get more anti-violence programming here. Imagine a president that really wanted to prioritize anti-violence, grassroots anti-violence programs, and who could direct resources that way to help us in terms of what's going on in our neighborhoods. And one clear example is what's happening with the stimulus packages. We need a bailout. Philadelphia and cities across the country are struggling right now. We had a $750 million deficit this year in terms of our budget. And that's probably not the worst that it's going to get. But this president has prioritized aiding corporations over aiding struggling cities. So it's critical.
Excellent.
Greg, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I concur with the council person, and I also would like to add, since we did talk about state, I think that when we talk about funding and so forth, it's so important for us to look at offices like Auditor General. I think it's important for us to understand that Nina and people who will monitor how the money is being distributed becomes an important part of something that we have ignored for numerous years. I mean, I don't know a lot of people who talk about, she was one of the first and has to be a long time, who has talked about how the funding from Pennsylvania is divvied out, how it's monitored, how there's some level of accountability of all the monies that are coming out of, say, like Harrisburg, for example, where some monies that is streamed in from the federal government and so forth. So we need people to kind of be on point in all areas in terms of the position. Attorney General, we need to make sure when we talk about police brutality, abuse, and so forth, I think that there's a fine line of juggling that's taking place. And I'll give you an example. We had a family whose car had been taken by a friend of a family member. The primary folks who owned the vehicle just happened to run up on individuals who were asleep in the car, and it gave them ample time to call the police department. The police came out, and the folks that was in the car were asleep. I'm sorry, they were asleep. When they woke up because the cop was tapping on the window, telling them they had to come out the car. When they were taken out the car, the male and the female were put on the ground and handcuffed. Now, under some circumstances, you can look at that and say, hey, wow, why, if they were asleep, why did they have to be taken out, put on the ground, and handcuffed? But it all depends on what the situation is and who is affected by it. The incident that occurred with this most recent tragedy had so much to do with, I believe, inexperienced officers, being in the community, being unprepared. And so I think that when we look at the Attorney General, when we look at the Auditor General, when we look at funding, when we look at the law being properly served or provided, rather, I'm sorry, that we need to make sure that we're looking across the board as to, again, the importance of the presidency, the importance of the congressperson, the importance of the senator, and so forth and so on, the attorney general, the auditor general. So I think that like the councilwoman, like the councilperson said, we do most definitely have to be conscious of the fact that Philadelphia is going through financial strife, but it's just as important in making sure as how the funds are coming to Philadelphia and how those funds are being accounted for insofar as once they're sent or being sent.
Emma, I want to put the same question to you, but I want to ask you to address it from the standpoint also of the pandemic. Like I believe that leadership kind of dictates the way that the whole nation moves as far as how serious they take it. Jamie mentioned how so many deaths could have been prevented had we just had gotten like a head start on this pandemic and it being real, but also leadership from the top saying what should we be doing in order to prevent the spread. How do you think that the presidential election can actually affect the pandemic?
Well, it's interesting. There's I like data. Almost everybody knows he knows I like data. So there's a research company, APM Research Lab Study, and they're actually following the demographics of the pandemic. And basically their numbers are like Black, Indigenous, Latinx. Those are the main groups that are most impacted. So if you're Black, you're 2 times as likely to die from COVID-19 as a white person. So when we look at the policy or the lack thereof and where COVID is really hitting, especially in the first 3/4 of the wave, we're hitting more blue cities, and the demographics that were being hit were not the same people that more than likely would vote for. I would do a lot of nonpartisan work, so I'm not used to being able to talk about like the actual candidate, but from the president. So that's actually, he's everybody's president. The president, and they had the same data. They're looking at it, and they said openly it's blue cities. And one of the things is healthcare, and the ACA, if it does go away, because of what may happen with the Supreme Court, it will fall back onto the states. Like there's some states that have great healthcare programs, like Massachusetts. So the ACA is kind of modeled after the Massachusetts health program. And so it's called Romney Care, which is really interesting because it's instituted by Mitt Romney. And so what may happen is the weight may come back to the states, and your state legislatures, their money is limited, and they'll be like, oh no, we're just not going to offer anything, and you're up a creek. The people in Massachusetts, they'll be like, we good. Our state already took care of this. So it's really critical for any candidate that you're looking for who may influence health care, period, and mental health is part of health care, is that they have some kind of viable platform and like worst case scenario. And right now we are in the worst case scenario because we're basically been told nothing's going to happen from the national level. So it's critical for Black people, particularly because we have such a high mortality rate from COVID, is that we care that there's somebody in place that will at least do contact tracing, at least provide enough testing, so that the group, I can't, maybe Jamie or Greg can remember the name of the group, the Black doctors who basically are like pulling together their own cash.
Black
Black
Doctors
Doctors
Consortium.
Consortium.
Yeah, and doing like testing in
Amazing.
parking lots. I mean, come on. We deserve better than that. But I mean, they're doing a great job, but that, people can go indoors and have a test at a doctor's office like you normally could. And they're just doing the best that they can. But that's not a viable long-term solution. And it's, they're doing it on their own time. So how long can they sustain that? It's awesome that they're just like, this has got to get done in our community. But if there were a national strategy, nobody would have to be standing in a parking lot scraping money together for tests. So
Yeah.
I mean, I had my own COVID-19 experience. It was not pleasant. And if there, that's driving a lot of how I feel about this whole election is basically I was just left on my own, you know, and that's not the way, that's not good governance at all.
I wanted to piggyback on Emma's point, and thank you for sharing your personal experience with COVID. I'm so sorry to hear that, but you know, I think sometimes people feel like these are like big issues, right? Or that they're far away from them. I just want to point out that West Philadelphia has the 2 zip codes that are among the highest for people who've been hospitalized for COVID. So having this president in place is killing us, right? Killing West Philadelphians. This is real. And I also want to point out that in 2016, 40% of the registered voters in the 3rd district stayed home. And so our charge this year has to be to change that.
Wow. Well, and Councilmember, thank you for that, because that leads me right to the next question, right? Our question is really around, we're trying to get more people registered. To your point earlier about the small percentage of people that didn't turn out, and that was one of the reasons why President Trump won Pennsylvania, right? So, but what do you say to those folks who are apathetic about voting? Those folks who say my vote doesn't count? People who point to the Electoral College and say, well, look at that, because you know, we can have a president that's elected, you know, by the Electoral College as opposed to majority vote. What is your response to that? And I ask the same thing of the rest of the panelists, and then I'm going to introduce our new guest.
Well, you know, unfortunately, the opportunity to register for this election has passed, right? Our charge right now has to be getting people out, getting people who are registered out to vote. And I think, you know, I've been kind of taking the approach that if we encourage people, if we talk to them about voting and why it's important, and if we help to, you know, help them to navigate in a very confusing time. We're doing mail-in voting for the, you know, everybody's doing mail-in voting, and that didn't used to happen before. We're in the midst of a pandemic. Polling locations have changed. So people do need information as well, right? And so I've taken the approach that if we encourage folks and if we give them information, that helps them to get out. I have a get out the vote effort called West Southwest Votes, where, you know, what we're doing, we're phone banking, you know, multiple times a week, we're text banking, we're writing letters to folks, we're driving them to the polls and to the voting centers. And so I think if we talk to folks, if we give them accurate information, and if we support them in any way we can, they'll get out there. And that has to be our task from now to November 3rd.
So anyone else want to touch that? Because I'm thinking about, the folks that I'm thinking about are the young and new voters, right? People who are just becoming eligible, but don't understand the process, right? So not necessarily folks that may have a difficult time, but folks that are, you know, just tuned out. Emma, what's your thought? Or Greg, let me go to Greg. Greg, what are your thoughts about folks who are apathetic and feel like, you know, their vote doesn't count?
Eric, I'm gonna be real honest. I don't think people on, let's say the street level, for lack of better description, those individuals who are the least talked to about what's going on, the guy that stands out there and people tend to be intimidated by because of their appearance versus having a conversation with them to really find out what's on the thought, you know, what's the thoughts of these individuals. We seen just 2 weeks ago where we had we took an area where there's a lot of activity in that particular area. And thanks to some young folks who took the initiative to say, hey, look, we matter. Mr. Greg, will you help, you know, listen, we matter. There are grassroots people who are on those corners who do have opinions. And they are prepared to be a part of what it takes to get their peer set involved in not just being registered. I think that's an important part. But I think what we tend to do is we get all caught up in these elections and we forget that the day after the election, no matter what seat is being run for, there's still people that have to be represented. There are people who still need to be engaged in this process. So when you talk about young people, or when you talk about those who are least likely to be addressed, I like to say it that way, we have a strong presence of folks out there. Here in Southwest Philadelphia, because I am a grassroots kind of worker, I'm convinced that it's bigger than just the presidential election. While the presidential election is significant, I think that for the survival and our future, we've got to begin to engage those same young people you're talking about, but not just on limited basis, like when this next presidential race occurs. And there's evidence that these young folks are interested. They do want to be listened to. They do want to have a conversation. And I've had the opportunity to experience those types of things. So when you go on those corners, you'll be surprised at what some of their conversations are about. Not those ones that are going to school, not those ones that you see in the supermarket, but the ones, again, that's most likely to be driven by, the ones that are most likely to be not paid attention to, again, because of fear in some instances. And then on the other hand, these are the ones that are the most challenging. And the same way that those police officers approached that difficult man the other night is the same way some people tend to address these young people who may appear more threatening. And so there is evidence, I videotape it all the time, of those individuals who are not in the mainstream, of those individuals who don't get on or get addressed. And I enjoy it. Because that's where I come from.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And before we go any further, you mentioned young people. I want to bring on our next guest, not because he's necessarily a young person, but because of the work that Keith does and the initiative that he is involved in. Our guest, Keith Warren, is the most immediate past president of 100 Black Men, and he's also connected to the Made Man Foundation. So, Keith, you're on mute right now, but can you come on and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yes. First, Eric, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to come on and to participate in this particular event tonight. I think it's so a lot of the topics, if not all of the topics, are topics that need to be discussed, not only from a historical perspective, but from a proactive perspective and going forward. So I appreciate being a part of the panel. As Eric Marsh said, my name is Keith Warren, past president of 100 Black Men in Philadelphia. Been involved with the organization going on 11 years. And our primary focus is to help young men of color and or young women of color as well to be the best persons that they can be. And in this particular case, become more engaged civically and not only look at the world as it's me, but it's more so we, as opposed to just it's all about me and only what it is that I can get from other people. So that's where we kind of focus what it is that we do. Our motto, we have two mottos as far as 100 is concerned. First one is what they see is what they'll be. So if they only see drug dealers sitting on the corner, a high percentage of the time, the young person, they're going to navigate to that particular individual because that's what they see. So our goal is to put multiple men of color in front of them from all walks of life, whether they're blue collar or white collar. They can see that I can be more than just what I'm seeing in front or down the street on the corner. Our last motto is mentoring across the lifetime. So our goal is to take a young person from 3rd grade all the way up until God calls them home and help them to stay in learn mode. And the same thing for young ladies as well. My background is, I went to school for business management, law, and finance. I'm originally from Toledo, Ohio, but I've been in Philadelphia since 1987, and I came out here for school and just ended up staying. And I love the way Philadelphia is positioned from a geographical perspective. And that's one of the reasons why I stayed in Philadelphia. But then it's also rich in culture, which a lot of cities can't really, really throw out there, that they have this vibrant culture. And one of the things, and I think this is something that needs to be advertised a little bit more, especially when it comes to young people. Mm-hmm. And that is, Philadelphia is geographically positioned better than almost any other country probably in the world.
Okay.
And if you look at Philadelphia, when you go north of Philadelphia, you're about an hour and a half to 2 hours south of New York, which arguably is the financial capital of the world. And then do the exact opposite of Philadelphia. You go an hour and a half to 2 hours south of Philadelphia, you're in DC, which arguably is the political capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some young people in Philadelphia that don't realize exactly where they sit in the entire world. And we have some Black young people, both young men and young women, that don't know that. And
So
I think,
Keith, let me jump in on that point, right? So our last question was specific to the demographic you just mentioned, young people in Philadelphia, apathetic voters, people who don't know where they are, not only geographically, but in their personal power in relation to voting, right? So tell us a little bit, what is your approach, or what do you think would be a response to young people who say our vote doesn't count, and they're apathetic about this current political climate and political process?
well, I think one of the things that we definitely have to do is to get them to understand that it's not just about what it is that they do individually. I mean, the way our communities have always increased their whole and improved themselves is what they've done collectively. And right now, because there's such a, what it is that I can do and what it is that I can get, narrative with a lot of young people and a lot of older people as well. I think that helping them to understand that if they have the attitude and the mindset that what they do not only affects them, what they do or what they don't do, not only affects them, but it also affects the people that are around them. So understanding civic responsibility outside of themselves. Okay, what is it that, if you don't vote, how is that going to affect your brother? How is that going to affect your sister? And you know what, how is it going to affect your, potentially, if they have kids going to get married or whatever, how is it going to affect your offspring? So I think that's one of the major things that we have to help them understand, that, again, it's not just the one person and one vote that's missing. It's the one person times 3 million.
Thank you.
Collectively.
Yeah, thank you. Isan, before we move on to you for the next question, I wanted to add something, and Emma, I see your hand, but there was a conversation that came up recently, and it comes up frequently when you talk to African Americans about voting, right? We often hear this phrase that, people died for our right to vote, right? And I remember recently in a meeting that there was another brother who actually mentioned the fact that, yeah, I get that people died for the right to vote. Now we have a responsibility to our ancestors and people who have come before us, but I'm concerned about my children. I'm concerned about my future. And voting is something that will impact that. And I say that in relation to the recent federal court appointment that Trump was able to just recently push through, and that the average term for federal Supreme Court judges is 40 years. That's a long time. That's our children's lifetime, plus they're already becoming parents by the time that one Supreme Court judge is out. So I wanted to throw that in there, but Emma, you had your hand up, so.
Well, I wanted to say in general, I think that, we focus a lot on youth and voting. But, I've given talks at AARP meetings and around voting and power. And a lot of the seniors are like, I just vote out of habit. I don't really know what a state legislator does. Seriously. And I think that parties in general and some candidates in general are used to just telling Black folks to just go vote. They know they kind of belong to one particular party. So it's not just young people who are like, I don't really know what I'm voting for. If you talk to enough voters, you'll see up and down that age scale that they are not happy. But there's some voters who are older, like, I know what the stakes are. I'm going to vote, but I am not pleased. And one of the things that I like to do, and it's, it's kind of fun, is to take really big issues and boil them down, because that's what the GOP is really good at, right? These simple phrases that you can remember, like during the DA's race, since my family votes has been around since 2008, even though we're all volunteers. And we had people in the community talking about civil asset forfeiture, and they were enraged. And you just have to break it down. It's like, yeah, you know how the cops come and they can take money off of you, and then, you know, and they're like, that's legal? It's like, yeah. and then they all got it, and they're like, that happened to my son. I thought they were crooked. Like, no, that's, you know, they were following the law. So, you know, Black folks are really astute at like getting it. Once you kind of get them on the path, then they just run. And so we have to know within our communities, whether somebody's 18 or they're 88, just put them on the path and they get it, and then they start spreading it. You don't even have to have a whole lot of money to spread information in the Black community, because it seems like every other person knows everybody else. So like with My Family Votes, our main focus, because we've gone back to our roots, is to focus on your house, because Black people are busy, right? So one of the things that we know, a lot of Black women are like the more frequent voters in the community. And in that household, they have a lot of say, right? But one thing is that you don't want to lecture people. So we give them the tools. Like, here's what, if you have a college age person, if you have an elder who might need, you know, emergency absentee ballot, because there's such a thing as people getting sick right before the election. All of these tools, and then how to talk about voting in a way that makes it personal. And that's one of the things that on the left or in the center, whichever way you want to be, we don't make voting personal, right? Voting is a feeling. I don't care what people say. That's my whole job, is to influence voters. You have to make people feel, and then they start thinking. Yeah. And so we have to start getting people to just gotta hit them right in the chest.
Exactly. Emma, you're touching on something that we're going to bring up. So hold on to that thought, because that's related to a question that we have later on in the conversation. Isan, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I wanted to say something and ask a question. So with things where Emma was just talking about, people vote like their convictions. I did want to make sure that I didn't throw this disclaimer out earlier, but MBK Cares, because we are a nonprofit organization, I want to make sure that I say this clearly. We're not endorsing any particular candidate on this platform of our nonprofit. And also we want to speak to the understanding that our audience may not necessarily be of one party, and our world is not of one party. Our government clearly isn't. But we want to actually bring this question up in light of that. How can we work together to unify our community across party lines? And I actually want to bring that question first to council member.
Unify our community?
Yeah, across party lines.
No. I don't know that many Black Republicans. I just don't. I mean, there's what am I trying to say? The Republican Party is not a real choice for the majority of Black people. Yes, there are a small amount of us who are Republicans. There's a very small amount of us who are, you know, who voted Republican in the 2016 election. But we should be clear that white folks voted Donald Trump into office. We should be very clear about that, not Black people. But Black people, I feel like, mostly vote Democratic, but they also don't vote when they're not enthused about what's, you know, about the candidates, right? And I think that's what happened last time. So Black folks are swing voters in the sense that they're going to vote and maybe vote enthusiastically, or they're not going to vote because they feel apathetic and they feel like no one is helping them and nothing is changing for them. So I don't really feel like there needs to be an effort to unite people across party lines. And I'm biased in that respect anyway. But I do feel like the Democrats need to speak to the needs of Black people more, and we need to have a platform that that really helps people every day in their lives. That's how we'll get people engaged and excited.
So can I jump in real quick, because you just touched on something, and I want to kind of push back against this thought, right? Because there's something in there about the platform or the agenda for Black America that the phrase itself immediately turns off or immediately grates people who are not Black Americans, right? but not all Democrats are Black Americans, right? And so how can we bridge that gap? How can we get this sense of understanding about the actual issues that impact us as human beings across the board? And I say that in response to just watching the council members' press conference earlier and reading the comments. Don't ever read the comments when you're online. It's a divisive, horrible experience. But in going through that, you get to see the way people think. And so I know that there's quite a few people who maybe even vote Democratic, but there's still a bit of a contention there in the community. So
I'm never going to make an apology for saying that we need to censor Black folks and have an agenda that helps them. I would never apologize for that, and I don't think any of us should.
Yeah,
and we will know that our country is working when everybody can participate in the opportunity that is present within our country. And that has never been the reality of Black people. And until we reach that point, we need to continue having an agenda that's going to get us there, and really be unapologetic about that.
Can I say something with that? Like this past summer, we had a heightened sense of racial inequality in this country when George Floyd died. There was a period of time that felt like there was white sympathy that came our way. And it didn't feel genuine in a lot of ways. And I don't know if that's offensive to any viewers, but it didn't feel like it was going to long last. And I think the evidence of it is now. We haven't seen it became like a trendy topic. And I remember on previous episodes of Wellness Wednesday saying like being a Black man at that time felt like being a panda bear. Like everybody's like, save the pandas, but nobody's doing the small things that prevent the climate from changing, that the pandas existing. And not saying that we're animals, we're not bears, but it's just the cute thing to do is to say like, save these cuddly animals, or these creatures, but we need some change. And one thing that I'm concerned about, particularly when it comes to the election, is not only the participation of people going out to vote, but I wonder, do people vote just sexually as well, or against? Did people not want to vote for a woman last time when it was Hillary versus Donald Trump? And this time I'm concerned about that too, because now we have a female vice president who actually is Black as well. And will people vote against a woman and against a Black woman at the same time? And I'm just concerned about equality impacting this election more than just the candidates being qualified.
I think people weren't excited to vote for Hillary Clinton. I don't think it was. I do think I will say there's a lot of sexism in our country, right? And you hear that in the way that people talk about the candidates and the way that you get treated, even as an elected, right? But I think it was more about the candidate, and that people were just kind of, they were not excited about the Clintons anymore, and they wanted something different. I saw a lot of things that were concerning to me when Kamala Harris was first sort of picked as VP. The way people were talking about her race, the way people were talking about her background, I did think it was both sexist and racist. But I feel like there was a shift, especially after that debate she had with Pence, and she just like tore him up. There was no further debate about whether she was Black. And there was no further debate about her competency. And so I do think that people are pretty excited about her. I think some folks are more excited about her than they are about Biden, honestly, in my opinion.
Can I make a comment on, I guess, working across party lines? I think that it's something that is necessary and is needed, because you can't run a country on half of the people. Ultimately, what ends up happening, if you take the attitude that there's no way possible that you can work across party lines, you're really not going to ever get anything done, because you're always going to have a push and pull situation. So I think Democrats and Republicans both need to kind of take a couple steps back and look at the focus of what it is, why they're in the positions that they're in, and that is to serve the people on both sides. And from a historical perspective, as far as my family is concerned, my father, my mother, and my stepfather were both Republicans, and I think it's something to be learned about having independent thought And one of the things that our members, our oldest member of our chapter, and I have always, whenever I make this statement, I always have to give him his kudos, because the phrase or the thought that he has said has sunk into me for the last probably 7 or 8 years. He's 84 years old. And one of the things that he always said is, we don't want to teach people what to think, but how to think. And because if you teach a person how to think, just like if you teach a person to fish, they'll be able to take information and rationalize it and make an educated decision based off the information that they're provided. Granted, they need to be provided information. And I think as far as our young people are concerned, we need to teach them how to grab information, how to research information, do their own due diligence, and then make an educated decision on that information. So I think, again, because, again, this is a nonpartisan conversation, I think it's something that we need to do. Now, did I follow the same footsteps as my mother, my and my stepfather? I'm going to say no, I did not, relative to party alignment. But I'm always going to be open to talk to the other person, because there's a couple of different things that come out of having that discussion. At bare minimum, you can find out what it is that you have in common. But more importantly, you're going to find out what they don't have in common, and how much are they going to stick to their guns in their belief system and in what it is that they want to accomplish, whether it's for you or against you. So there always has to be some type of conversation. And again, I go back to that statement again. We don't want to teach young people or older people what to think. We need to help them to learn how to think. Because again, if you teach them how to think now, that's something that they can transfer to the younger generation. And that's, again, kudos to my mother and my stepfather, because they weren't trying to tell me, hey, you need to be on this side of the party line, or you need to be on that side of the party line. You just need to be in the party. That's the biggest thing. You need to be in the party.
I'd like to chime in on that, if you don't mind, just real quick. I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we don't allow ourselves to be stretched. One of the benefits I think that has happened in my grassroots involvement in the community is that I do have Republican friends. I do have Black Republican friends. I have white Republican friends. And what I mean, why that's so important, is because when I'm, as a block captain, when I'm cleaning the street, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, as long as you're willing to take the broom and serve our purpose, which is to clean our communities. I think that when we look at things from a party line, Democrats have been the domineering, the primary party in Philadelphia for a significant amount of time. And not only Democrats, but Black Democrats. So I think what we need to really do in order to address significant change is to look at things from a grassroots perspective and not forget the history of what already was in place. Now, as a ward leader, I deal with grassroots politics. What I do is I go and I look at numbers after an election, for example, and I look at how people vote. So I know where white people voted in this last election, and I know where Black people voted in this last election. I know where Black people voted in the previous elections, and I know where Black people voted, white people voted in previous elections. Thinking about Emma, for example, she says she deals with statistics. That is so important because you can't argue the numbers. What we need to understand is that the issue with Black people is changing now. With gentrification, things of this nature that we have no choice on now. It's here. We can't look at things as just this, only dealing with Black issues. While Black issues are still the priority for us, we have to understand now, we have new neighbors. We have people that come from other cultural backgrounds, and we can't allow ourselves to appear so limited in our ability to be able to engage that we can only stay in our little particular part of the room. So, and I'm not saying that that's what anybody's saying. I just want to make it clear as to how I look at this thing from a grassroots perspective. And again, encouraging dialogue, because the important part is young people, senior citizens, Black neighbors, white neighbors, Democrats, Republicans, it's all one community now. And what we've got to learn how to do at this point, especially as Black leaders, is be able to figure out how do we bridge the relationships, and the relationships being bridged be based on the benefit of the community, period, and no longer trying to figure out how we just come up with our Democrat Republican platforms. While the Democratic platform, I'm a Democratic ward leader. I mean, I'm going to push Democrat. But I think what Keith said earlier was so important, and that is we've got to be able to engage others. We've got to be able, because the world is this city politics is bigger than just the Democratic Party.
I just wanted to make the distinction. I would like to make a distinction.
I saw
between
Emma jumping out of her seat. So I thank you, Councilmember, you're next, but I want Emma to
That's
go.
why I waited.
Sorry.
I have to piggyback off of what Jamie, I know you Jamie, so I'll call you Jamie, but Councilmember Gautier.
I'm Jamie. That's fine.
We are one of the few groups that always talks about how we have to dilute what we need to bring in other people. The LGBTQ community, they were like, we want marriage equality, Obama, get behind it. They got money behind it, they put their weight behind it, and guess what? They got what they wanted. So we have to say, I'm Black, I'm unapologetic, this is what Black people need. Black people are dying of COVID, Black people have housing insecurity, Black people need health insurance. We're gonna put our weight behind it, because people who are running for office sure come to churches, barbershops, corners to get your vote. And I am unapologetically a Black voter, and I want things addressed. And one of the things is gentrification. Yes, we do have neighbors who don't look like us, but we need to make sure that we don't push out so we have fewer neighbors that don't look like us. And you have to come to the table, and you have to know the nature of power. And one of the things is that we're looking at in Washington is a minority group is running the power, because they know how to move the levers of the system, and they're putting their weight behind the things that move what they want. So we have to be focused. And the whole thing about movement building in the 60s and all that wonderful legislation, the Voting Rights Act, is that Black people were like, we're gonna put our eggs in this basket, and we're gonna vote this way, and this is what we want, or the next time we vote, we're not gonna get it. So that is the one thing. We have to be stronger. And I do understand coalition building. There is going to be some commonality among other groups, but we have to be focused. And there are other groups who want the same thing, like the whole Voting Rights Act. Immigrant communities, they benefited from the Voting Rights Act. Like, I work with groups who are Asian. They always talk about the Voting Rights Act. They're like, that's what helped us get the right to vote.
But Emma, I just want to say this because of what you said earlier. And I think, again, if you look at the statistics, if we were to sit right here, right now, and look at the voting pattern of white folks in this most recent election, you'd learn a lot in reference to Black and white. And because there was only Black candidates there, it would still say a lot. But with that being said, I think we have to stop talking about Black, and we have to be more engaged. If you look at my activities and other activities of other Black people who are actually doing the work in the community, we work Black. We live Black. We are Black. We don't have to say how Black we are. But what we do have to understand is that we can't be railroaded, because that's happened before. I've seen it. I've seen what happened when you got Black people who talk Black, but when you look at them in the room and you really go in the room with them, it's not as Black as it may appear. I like to be a realist, and like I said, I think when we follow one another, you know, all I deal with is young Black people on the corners, Black people in church, Black people as committee people, Black people as a ward leader. So I just wanted to share that I am pro-Black, but I am not locked into not being able to have dialogue with anybody.
I want a council member to respond now.
Thank you. I just wanted to add further clarification about what I meant. I am not suggesting that we should limit our thoughts. I am not suggesting that we shouldn't challenge candidates or even people who are already in office. We should do all of those things. What I'm saying is that the Republican Party, particularly in its current formation, is not a serious choice for Black people. It is not. These people are actively, I mean, even as it relates to this current election, are trying to take away our right to vote and participate. And they're doing that because this is a Black city. That's why they're challenging everything that Philadelphia is doing to allow people to participate in the election, right? So not only do they not have a policy agenda that includes us and that would support us, they're actively working against us, even our right to participate in this democracy. So that I just wanted that to be clear. And there's a difference between saying Republican is not an option and you should just vote Democratic and do nothing else, right? You have to engage with these folks. You have to learn about the candidates. You have to be active in advocacy and pushing our elected officials and holding them accountable. All of that still matters. Also, you know, Democrats are a big, you know, we have a big tent. And so there are a lot of people in this party who have a lot of different ideas. And we need to make sure that we're putting the best people in place. And so I'm in no way suggesting that folks should just move passively throughout the world and not engage in our government. I'm just talking about the real options that kind of are on the table. And I also, I failed to mention that obviously independent candidates are an important part of what we should be talking about. Eric used to work for the first independent candidate on city council who is amazing and who really showed the power of the vote. Nobody thought that Councilmember Brooks was going to win her election, and here we are.
Thank you, because that leads me to the point that I was going to add to this whole conversation before we moved on to the next question and before Isan chimed in. I think one of the challenges that has been highlighted just by this last round of comments is the fact that is the two-party system broken? Like, are we trapped? Like, in a way, we're forced into a dichotomy because of these two major parties. And anybody that questions that really should go back to 2016 and think about the implications of the Democratic Party and its impact on Bernie Sanders' campaign and his viability, right? And so I really wanted to just kind of bring that up. One, because again, MBK Cares is nonpartisan, but two, because I think we inevitably, as human beings, fall into this dichotomy of this argument when we only have this or that. I think I love what Greg and Emma were saying in regards to statistics, because history is very similar, right? If you go back and looked at party makeup back in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, the majority of the party makeup was predominantly white male, right? And so because both parties were represented by similar demographics, there was a cohesiveness or a similarity in like viewpoints and vision across both parties. And so there was a way that it operated that was very different than what's happening today. And as the demographic shift occurred with more Blacks, immigrants, and other folks, non-white males being involved in politics, you saw a strong shift or swing of white males into the Republican Party. And that's the kind of thing that I was getting at earlier with my earlier comment about how do we address that divisiveness or that division that occurs. But I don't want to, it was something to think about. Maybe we can get back to that. I see everybody raising their hand. Isan, did you want to? We've only got a little bit of time, so I don't know if we wanted to stick with that or.
You know what? But faith plays a part in this. I know that for me, particularly when I first got into the life of the church, it was like I was raised in church, but when I got back into it, it was like 2003. And I remember feeling like a Christian conviction to vote my faith instead of my party. Like I was a Democrat and I voted for George Bush in 2004. And I remember telling one of my friends that, and I was like he won, and I remember feeling like, dang, did I make him win? My one vote may not have counted, but when you look at the grand scheme of things, if a lot of people vote that way, Philly, I don't think he won Philly anyway. So my vote didn't impact things then. But what I realize is that your convictions can wind up playing a part in this thing. And what I think is necessary, and I'm saying this as a Christian to anybody out there, vote the fruit of the person that you see, not just the faith that they proclaim. If a person's out here murdering people, don't say, okay, but they're a Christian, they're murdering people. I stand for that person. Vote the fruit of the candidate, not just the religion that they say out their mouth. And that's something I'm sure, Greg, you're a believer. Like, we know we got to judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, and see if there's a decent person. And then you were just talking about something with parties. One of the people I hear the most about their character is an independent candidate. His name is Mark Charles. He's a Native American. I hear so many great things about this man, and he's a minority in this race. But I hear great things about his character, about the plans, the ideas that he has from several people. Wish that the opportunities were there for the best candidates to be on the highest platform.
Absolutely.
I like to jump
And Eric, I would add in.
Keith, hold on. Keith, hold on a second. Emma was speaking first, and then we'll go to Keith.
I would like to go back to Isan's comments about sincerity around people who say that they're allies. The one thing right now I can tell you, if you run a nonprofit and it's Black led, you can get some money, right? So this is a great time because people are like, oh no, you say people of color? And they're like, maybe. You say you're a Black led organization? Okay, let's sit down and talk. So you have to leverage, for me, like when I'm talking to my clients, I'm like, okay, I hear you say people of color, but all your leadership is Black women. Say you're a Black women-led organization and see the money pour in, right? In my neighborhood, there are all these Black Lives Matter signs that people that don't look like me have up. So if I'm running for office or I'm helping somebody run for office, I'm gonna knock on their door and I'm like, you know what? My candidate is Black. Okay, cool. They're gonna listen. So we have to leverage. We cannot judge what's in somebody's heart. We can judge them by their actions. So if they're giving money or they're voting a certain way on issues, we'll keep it on issues, because they're voting for a candidate because of the way they feel about an issue, then we have to leverage the moment, right? So that's why I say I'm unapologetically Black, because Black is cool right now, right? So
yeah, and anybody that wants to support, contact mbkcares@gmail.com. Keith, go ahead. What was it that you wanted to share, Keith?
Well, I wanted to, and I think this is going back to your question about the two-party system. I mean, granted, it's three-party, but in all actuality, it's two. I know for me personally, if there was a viable third party, I probably would go to that viable third party. I'm more of an independent than I am either of the parties that are really running the country, whether it's Democrat or Republican. I'm more so on the independent side, but I do understand that there needs to be an understanding of the numbers, and that a voting block gets things done as opposed to a voting person. And I think if you do become that independent, you truly are that independent, in that you're not going to get the movement that you want, i.e. Bernie Sanders. I mean, it took him decades to make being independent, quote unquote, cool, so to speak. But it really didn't truly get that way for a good 20 to 25 years of him being kind of walking that line. So I know for me personally, if there was a viable candidate and another party that was viable, I would probably go to that other party because I see benefits on both sides. On the personal side and the community side, definitely I see the Democrat being the side to go to. And then on the Republican side, you're really looking at business more so than anything. If there was a way to combine the two into another party that was really could compete against both of them, I see a good number of people of saying, hey, you know what? I would like to go to that party. And going back to Mr. Hines' statement as far as voting from his religious from his religious foundation. I'm the same way. My grandfather was a pastor. My grandmother was a pastor. And we have probably 15 pastors in my family. So religious and our foundation is very, very strong. And I see that there are some issues that go against that, you know. So if there was some way to go, I probably would take a real serious look after doing some due diligence and saying, hey, if it's viable, I'd consider it. I don't know if anybody else would say that they would do that, but I know myself, I would look at it as a viable option.
I think that's probably true for a lot of people. I think a lot of people would vote for a third party if that was a real option for them and if they felt that their votes would matter.
Well, I mean, Councilmember, you mentioned it earlier, working family parties and Kendra
Yes.
Brooks.
Yes.
Historic, a landslide election, not a landslide, but she still won the first, third party candidate to win the council seat in well over 100 years.
It was amazing.
So
yeah.
That is evidence that people are looking for, and that there are other options out there, right? And so I just wonder if the system itself isn't set up in a way that is forcing us into this, again, I'll use the word dichotomy, this either or, as opposed to having multiple choices. So as we're getting,
can I just share one more thing on that, Eric?
Real quick, because we're running out.
Go.
No, I just wanted to ask one of the final questions, and I want to make sure we go around, and I want to end with Keith, because Keith, you're here. I want to share a little bit about what's happening with the maiden name. I'm going to ask you to go after the other panelists. But the question I wanted to ask is, what are some ways that we can engage? I want to say young people, but Emma, thank you for mentioning, that there are older voters as well. But what are some ways that we can encourage and inspire people to be more civically engaged, right? So we've been talking about voting this whole time, but the intention was really to kind of transition more into all of civic engagement, which I think, Greg, you touched on a little bit about with your analogy about the sweeping the street, right? What are some things that we can do to inspire and encourage our residents, our community members, our neighbors, and young people and our children to be more civically engaged and engaged in politics and voting? And I'll start with Councilmember Gaudier.
I think talking to young people about voting, about why it's important, about how government works, helping to make, government really more transparent for them, and helping to draw a more direct line between government and their everyday lives would help. I also think I agree with Greg that it's also about how we engage young people every day, right? And I think people have to see that they play a meaningful role in their communities, and the more that they see that, the more they'll be engaged. So I think getting youth involved in neighborhood activities, right? It could be, I don't know, taking care of the neighborhood park, or it could be, hosting, maybe coming up with activities for young people in the neighborhood, or a host of probably community activities that just allow people to see that if they participate, it matters. I think the more people participate, the more they start to participate in bigger and more meaningful ways. And so allowing young folks to get engaged in what's going on in our neighborhoods and communities, I think will make them want to be involved even more, and want to be involved in voting and in our democracy.
Excellent, thank you. Emma?
Well, one thing I like to see is when I talk to younger people, I'm like, if you get involved in a very small local election, right? So next year we have our DA's race. And a lot of local elections are sometimes, I remember a couple of years, I think a city council person won by like 20 or 40 votes. It was really slim. I mean, that was just like everybody on your block, basically. And so to get them to look at the smaller municipal races, see how it directly impacts their lives, and see how few votes actually can move the election, and get them involved in helping them talk to other voters they get so excited when they see somebody move on an issue. And also bringing them into the halls of power. Like maybe, you know, we got Zoom now, so I don't even have to leave the house. See how city council votes, how they talk about issues, how their public comments, how you can make your own public comment, and it makes it into the record, and a city council person says, Emma had a really good point. You know, it gets you excited, you know? So it's like little things that people can do. Doesn't have to be this broad, overreaching thing, just to get people involved. And you'd be surprised how you get acknowledged in a meeting when you do a public testimony. It means a whole lot.
Excellent, excellent. Greg, how can we get more people civically engaged, including particularly young people?
I think people like real. I think what happened with what Ashan said earlier, insofar as my faith is really significant to me. And while I don't Bible beat people or try to encourage or force people, do try to encourage, but don't try to force people to do what I do. I have learned that there are a lot of young people, whether we believe it or not, that are driven by their faith. It's just that the conversation's never there. And when you get an opportunity to sit down and talk to them, and you meet them where they're at versus trying to take them to where you want them to be, and be right there with them and create within their environment that opportunity for them to see that they can make a significant change. What do I mean? So you take a drug corner. You take a corner where they normally sell drugs. Instead of trying to get them to come somewhere else, why can't we just sit down and have that discussion? And I can share, and this is one of the things that does work. I can share about the fact that I come from a drug-infested block, which was ridden by prostitution. Now that makes a connect, because that's right there where they're at. Now, they too can sweep right there where they're selling drugs at. And so while that may seem like something like, ooh, but they're still selling drugs, you make impact and you make change. And when people can see the vision of what change actually looks like, change can become greater to them. Our young people, our neighbors, our community people, they want real. They're tired of people just talking to them about stuff that is not relevant to what life they're living. And so when you look at that and being a grassroots, even as a ward leader, I never allow myself to let this title become so significant that I can't just connect with just being a neighbor. If I had my way, every elected official would at least be a block captain. Because I think what it does is it keeps us close to the ground. It keeps us connected to the folks that we say we want to represent. It allows us to hear and go through the process of doing certain activities in the community and not just wait until we have a meeting at the rec center or a Zoom meeting on the, so those are the things I believe are just, that's just a small example of the practices that we can put in place that would begin to draw people's attention. We have committee people, and I'm gonna close with this. All my committee people have been given tools to be prepared to work with on election day. They have links so that now when the people come up to them and say, hey, where do I vote at? Where's my polling place? They can go right and put the person's address right into their phone. We have where people can find out if they're registered or not. These are taking people who were not in the past involved in those types of things. We don't need people to keep doing stuff for us from the outside. We need to take us who are on the inside, train us, prepare us, and they'll link in with us better.
Excellent, Gregory. So Keith, I wanted to end with you because I know that you are not only part of the 100 Black Men Philadelphia that's been doing just consistent work on getting folks involved and registered to vote, but also the Made Man Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about the work, the Made Man Foundation, and that initiative to get more voters involved? You're on mute right now, Keith.
Oops. I do that all the time. I don't know why I keep doing it. One of these days I'll learn. No, I appreciate it. The Made Man Foundation, phenomenal organization, really grassroots. It's not only national, but it's actually international. And the primary focus is to bring more positive advertisement and more positive, I guess, advertisement for Black men. whether they're community or civically engaged, or business-wise as well. What has been happening over the last probably 2 to 3 weeks, and they've started putting together, they put together a program that is phenomenal, and it's all geared around voter education, not just getting a person geared up for the presidential election. The whole idea is to get them situated for the election, but not only for this election, but for future elections. And what they want to do is make sure that young men do not only focus on the presidential election. So they came up with this three-pronged or three-tiered program and initiative. The first one that started a couple of weeks ago, and it was really putting together a series of, just in Philadelphia, and this is happening in other cities with the Made Man, just in Philadelphia, getting 150 Black men to have put together a 30-second to 1-minute conversation of they having a conversation with their son or with their nephew or their mentee about voting. And that's it, bipartisan, just having that discussion. And the question is, what does voting mean to you? That was the first initiative that took place. This week, the focus is same thing, but 150 men getting themselves just to making a pledge on that they are going to vote. And then a second video as to why they are voting. Again, bipartisan, going back to just voter education. And we want to keep it bipartisan so that it can be utilized for generations to come. Powerful thing if you can use the same video, the same information for multiple voting opportunities. The last thing, and this is kind of gearing towards the youth, same thing, video, 30 seconds to 1 minute, and that is the youth video, and that is, the initiative is youth. Why must I vote? So what we're doing next week is getting 150 young people to answer that question as to voting and why they vote as well. And again, putting it all together, you're looking at 400 plus videos, 450 videos to be exact, all geared around young Black men making a conversation with themselves that can be put out there to let everyone else know, hey, this is who I am, this is why I think voting is important, and that I'm going to vote as well. Because I think it's very, very powerful for other young people, especially other young Black men who don't feel voting is necessary, to see their peers being unapologetic about who they are and what it is that they're looking to accomplish and why they're looking to do what it is that they're doing on the voting education and voting side as well. So obviously we're always looking for men to step up and do the exact same thing, create those videos. And then ultimately the Made Man Foundation will take those and start to utilize them proactively on the social media sites. And again, that's why they're looking for them to be nonpartisan, so that regardless of how the young person, what they think and what side they kind of go on, whether they're Democrat or Republican or independent, the fact is they're thinking about it and they're taking some positive action.
All right, Keith, thank you so much. How can people submit their videos? Give me some contact information to share with the people that are watching.
Yeah, so what you can do is you can reach out to me. My email address is keith.warren, and that's KEITH, .warren, WARREN, at the number 100 Black Men Philly, that's PHILLY.org. So I'll repeat that. That's Keith.Warren at 100 Black Men Philly.org. You can email me, but the best thing to do is just create your own video and get as many other young people to do the exact same thing, or as many other men to do the exact same thing. The men, we want them to make a pledge that they are going to vote. That's the first video, 30 to 1 minute. Second video is why you are voting. That's for the men. For the young people, the question is, why is voting important? And then the second video is the same thing, making a pledge that you're going to vote. So just shoot those videos to me at that email address, and I will get that information and those videos to the Made Man Foundation, and they will be utilized proactively in helping to get the word out about voter education going forward.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so as we wrap up, we want everyone to just share your contact information and anything you want to share with the community as we wrap up this amazing conversation. Thank you all for being here. Emma, share with us what you are doing in the community and what information you'd like to give the folks regarding your content.
So My Family Votes, and we're very consistent on Facebook, My Family Votes, and our website, myfamilyvotes.com, has details about how to vote successfully. And we have an info page, and it basically is voting on the go, and it's pretty much every link to every official site you need, down to like how to find your poll. One thing I want to tell people: get your ballot in as soon as possible if you have a mail-in ballot, and don't mail it. If at all possible, find a drop box or take it to a satellite center, because if there's any challenges on those mail-in ballots, it's going to be around postmarks and when it came in. So just get it in as soon as possible. You can reach me at outreach@myfamilyvotes, and just vote, vote, vote.
Excuse me, Emma,
Excellent.
before the next person goes, Emma, could you please describe the proper way to drop that envelope off? Every step,
Right, okay.
different things about that.
Yeah, so there's a video floating around that I did with the coalition group that I'm working with, Mike Brotrack. And basically, black or blue ink, no marks on anything, right? Black or blue ink on your ballot, white secrecy envelope, don't write on that thing at all. And then put it into the mailing envelope and sign it and date it on the back where it says declaration. And then you can take it only to official sites, right? There's 17 satellite sites as listed on our site, and they'll take you right to the city too in case there are any updates, as well as there are drop boxes, and they're probably going to be even more added on as we get closer to the election. They're all over the city. It doesn't matter where you drop it. So, and with the satellite centers, it doesn't matter whether you live in West and you drop it off Northeast, just drop it in Philly. Nobody else's drop boxes. So if you're King of Prussia Mall, don't drop your ballot in a drop box that you see in King of Prussia. That is a different county. Has to be in Philly.
And are those drop boxes designed a certain way so we know we're not putting a ballot into something to be destroyed?
Yeah, so when you look at the official locations, you'll see the boxes. They look similar to a mailbox, but you can't like put your hand in or anything. And they're monitored. That's the one thing about these locations.
Great.
There's a camera on it. And the other thing is too, it is illegal to handle somebody else's ballot. Okay? So don't go up to a drop box with 5 other voters' ballots in your hand. You can help someone who is sick or disabled. You both have to sign a form called a designation form. And then once they sign it, you can only help people who also live in the same household as that first person, right? So that's to prevent people from going all around the neighborhood and collecting all ballots. So just to let you know, they are monitored by cameras and you have to follow the law.
Excellent, thank you. Greg, anything you want to share, any contact information? And you're muted right now.
Real quick, I'd just like to first thank you all for this, allowing me to be a part of this conversation with some of these dynamite panelists that were on here this evening. I'd just like to encourage folks. We have a Facebook page called the Democratic 51st Ward, the Democratic 51st Ward Executive Committee. Democratic 51st Ward Executive Committee. We post everything on there that's going on in this community, or as much as we learn about our community. And we have that, we use this as a means of being able to engage folks. Again, the Democratic 51st Ward Executive Committee Facebook would be an excellent way to not only get in contact with us, but you can send us information as well that we can look at. And again, thank you. I gotta run, and I messed up when you asked that at the very beginning, Eric, and please, I apologize. Don't hold that against me. Please let me come back one more time about any other kind of topic. Emma, good seeing you, young lady.
Appreciate you.
Keith, nice meeting you. Councilwoman, take care.
Excellent. Now, last but not least, we want to have Councilmember Gaudier. I know you've been swamped with work, with everything. It seems like you have one of the busiest districts in this city. I too am a resident as well, so glad to be under your leadership here. Please share any information that you'd like to share with our viewers before we close out.
In terms of contacting me, people can reach the office by phone, 215-686-0460. People can email me at any time at jamie.gaudier@phila.gov. And I am at Councilmember JG on every social media platform, so Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I guess in closing, I would just want to say to folks, we're voting for our lives this time. That's really true, right? So make sure that you participate, even if you haven't participated before. This is the year. And last, I wanted to just encourage everybody to take care of each other and take care of yourselves. This is a really hard time for our community, and we have to support each other, and then we have to push for change, right? Or do those things at the same time, rather. But we have to be here in order to get the change. So
Excellent. Isan?
Absolutely. This was a great panel, great conversation. This past Monday, I had a conversation with my cousin Kia, and one of the things that came up was about faith, but also about the importance of voting. So in that conversation, the theme came out about casting your vote, but also casting your cares. So we had to realize like those two things are separate. Neither one of these candidates are Jesus. Neither one of these candidates are any savior for our lives, but they can be more ideal than the other. So hopefully we get something that moves us closer towards a place of peace, a world of solutions, something that can get us out of this pandemic, better people, and also a place where just more equality. So that's what I'm hoping comes out of this election, and I'm hoping comes out of all of the aftermath of this year. 2020 has been very, very hard. This week has been very, very hard in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, we are aware of the struggles that we're having right now, the fears that we have outside of our doors, the fears that we have sometimes just wearing our skin color, just wanting to be seen as a human being on this planet. And as we move forward right now, MBK Cares is here for you. We believe that the elected officials in our community are here for you. My dad was a state representative for almost 2 decades, and he always told me that he would never forget to say that he was an elected official, not just a politician, because he always wanted to remember that the people put him there. And I'm grateful that we have representatives here who do the same. And I'm really appreciative for the work that you all are doing, not just politically, but the work that you all are doing with your quality of life. Also want to just close out with, I'm going to share a video, but I also just want to make sure that we encourage people to actually not be afraid next week. With all the trauma in this city right now, one of the concerns I have is what happens if we have the riots that are going on now and then the election goes any direction. Because I think there's going to be aftermath regardless of how it goes. I encourage everyone, please be responsible with the decisions you make. The decisions you make every single day can impact the rest of your life. And it can impact other people's lives going forward, strangers. So please be very careful on how you take care of your mental health. Please be very careful about how you tend to the mental health of other people when it comes to being careful with your words. Words have a lot of power. As we see within the political realm, you can bully people with your words and your level of influence. Please be very careful to use your level of influence in ways that build people instead of breaking them down. So we encourage you right now to come back to our next episode of MBK Cares Wellness Wednesday. Please keep us in your thoughts and prayers. We have incredible programs that we're planning for the future when outside is a safe place to be. And right now, I just want to share a video, and then we'll close out from that point. This video was created in the aftermath of George Floyd's dying. And my friend Kalani Davis created this video. It's called Systemic. And he encourages people to vote at the beginning of the video. And the video serves also as like a timeline of how the first half of this year went. So please encourage everyone to take care of your mental health, take care of somebody else if you can, and please vote your convictions. And thank you to our panel.
What's going on, people? My name is Kalani Davis. I'm a filmmaker in Philadelphia. There's a lot going on in America right now, and the police brutality has been going on for a long time. But I think we can all agree that when George Floyd passed away, it hit a little different. The night George died, my heart broke. And as an artist, I wanted to create something to promote change and encourage my people. So I made some music, I collaborated with a couple of artists, and I made a video. I'm talking to you now because regardless what your influence is, regardless what your craft is, I want to encourage you to do the same thing. And if you feel like there's nothing you can do, the one thing you can do is vote come November. Here's my project.
Sedan, certainly people upset here tonight, but we've got, innocent business owners who are now going up in flames. What's it going to take for you guys to be okay tonight and to stop this chaos?
It ain't me. It's not me. I'm going to let y'all know that now. It's not us guys neither. It's the police. It's the madness that they sparked up. This is what you get out of you taking a loved one from someone. You get a lot of people that's hurt, and they can't bend it the right way. They can't no longer depend on the police to be here to protect us like they say they gonna do. I can't tell you it's gonna end tomorrow. I don't know when it's gonna end. But it's for y'all to start. We're not the ones that's killing us. Y'all killing us. We can't make a change if y'all don't change.
Came into this year, 2020 focused, this pain you hear, 2020 focused, January hurt when my hero died, Kobe didn't go to me, please let me clarify, February very scary, pandemic on the globe, everywhere, heavy worry, COVID took control, homebound, no jobs, increased the stress, March rain, hurricanes, and disease and death, around the same time the cops killed Rihanna, gunned down as she's sleeping in pajamas, say her name, say her name, say her name. No justice, no peace, make it plain. Trying to see what y'all selling, but it's all blurry. A brother killed while he jogged, all buried. Say his name, say his name, say his name. And if we free, treat us free and break the chain. Feel your adrenaline spilling from in the pen. Another hashtag, they killing on us again. Venom in them, they filming them, sending and then he grin. The demon in them scheming is foreign, is he a gin? Cold stairs when they go there vamping. Knee on his neck, he's comfortable, cold lamping. Me on the set, envision me with a tech. These tears creep, feels like I'm bleeding to death. Lord help us, civil war muskets, civil war's Russian. Being uncivil is just subtraction. Beings with the power undeserved, but they lusted. My brother Ford's windpipes crushing. See them clutching, pistols they never figured to touch. They figured this much, it's coming this now. Beast with a smirk in a crowd. The dirt of the earth with a stench so foul, make the angels say wow.
I come here tonight and plead with you. Believe in yourself and believe that you're somebody. I said to the group last night, nobody else can do this for us. No document can do this for us. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us. No Jeffersonian or Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can do this for us. If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with the pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation. Let everybody take your man.
We don't get some hella fast, off the body split in half, divided by the Democrats. I did the math. Subtract all the assumptions about my black skin. Total of my content and character from my actions. Equal in the race without jumping hurdles or backflips. Even if I had a past, leave it in my past tense. please. And that goes for corporate and cops. Swear I'm all for reform, but if you reform it or not, conscious choice moving forward, require for it to stop. It's a hard thing, it's a hard thing. Martin Luther spark dream, we the offspring, so it's our thing. I carry batons, I carry the torch, just speak in my mind, so I reinforce. I still believe in the force, cause every cop been trying to leave you a corpse. Shit, my white brothers that'll show me respect, I show you the same, just know I reflect. Let's fight together till it's better and we find a way to lower this threat.
So just as I say we aren't gonna let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't gonna let any injunction turn us around. I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead.
What's going on, people? My name is Kalani Davis. I'm a filmmaker in Philadelphia. There's a lot going on in America right now, and the police brutality has been.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I hope you enjoyed that video. I haven't seen that video in about a week or so, and it just gave me chills with the current climate of what just happened this week. So yeah, that hit hard. I appreciate every one of you. Keep praying. Keep praying. Some of these fights have to happen on our knees. Appreciate you all. And thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to us tonight. Thank you for the questions from the people who submitted to our conversation tonight. And I appreciate you, Keith, Emma, Greg, and Council Member Jamie. We really appreciate you. And Eric, my brother, thank you again for a great conversation and for whatever it is that you add to this world, which is a beautiful thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Appreciate you.
Have a good night, everyone.